Hey there, folks. Hope you're doing well today. Thanks for joining us for another episode of America Explained. And so far, we've broken down the history of the colonies, discussed the Revolutionary War and what happened afterwards, and even deep dove into the Declaration of Independence. But now we'd like to actually dive into the Constitution, the document itself. Because what we learned with the Declaration of Independence is that was America's ideals. But the Constitution is actually America's wiring. It doesn't tell you what America believes. It tells you who gets power, who blocks it, and how hard change is supposed to be. And here's the part most people never learn. The Constitution people defend today is not the Constitution that was originally written. In previous episodes, we learned that after independence, that the first American system collapsed. And this has to do with the Articles of Confederation. The 13 colonies wanted very limited government, and the Articles of Confederation did just that, but the outcomes weren't as expected. What we saw was states acting like rival countries. Congress had the inability to tax and get funds. The federal government wasn't even able to enforce laws. Not to mention, we just came out of a giant war and we're seeing incredible amounts of debt, all resulting in inflation. That eventually leads to an armed rebellion, farmers rising up against debt and taxation. To the political elite, this isn't liberty, it's disorder. And so the Constitutional Convention isn't called to expand democracy, but instead the political elite wanted to contain instability. And that's important, right? Because the Constitution isn't born from optimism. It's born from fear of chaos, rebellion, and of the public itself. And so that leads to the creation of the original Constitution, not the Constitution we know today. So what did the original Constitution actually do? Well, it did three main things. It centralized power. For the first time, the federal government was able to tax directly, maintain a standing army, and regulate commerce. And this is a sharp turn away from the revolutionary distrust of central authority. Secondly, it fragmented power internally. The government was split into three different branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Each branch is designed to slow and block the others. Gridlock isn't a failure, it's the system working as intended. And then finally, the Constitution insulated leadership from voters. Senators were not directly elected, the president is chosen indirectly, and judges are appointed for life. So the system assumed that popular will is dangerous if left unchecked. So it's just as important for us to recognize what the original Constitution did not include. It was no guarantee of any of the things we come to know the Constitution to be all about. There was no guarantee of free speech, no freedom of religion, no freedom of the press, no right to assemble, no protection against unreasonable searches. None of the rights that people now treat as these foundational rights are actually there. That's not an accident. The framers believed listing rights was unnecessary or even risky. This led to a lot of backlash, and the omission of these rights nearly kills the Constitution. A lot of anti-federalists warned a powerful government without explicit limits looks exactly like the tyranny they just fought. Ratification then only succeeds because the Federalists make a promise that amendments will be added immediately. And that promise matters, because without it, there would have been likely no Constitution. So the Constitution's created in 1787. In 1789, Congress proposes amendments. And then by 1791, the first 10 are ratified as the Bill of Rights. And these include the First Amendment, which includes speech, religion, press, assembly. The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms and assemble as a militia, also including things like protections against arbitrary arrest, as well as limits on federal power. Again, these rights were not part of the founding blueprint. They are concessions demanded by skeptics after the fact. But this is part of a deeper pattern that never changes. Every major expansion of rights comes later, after protest, conflict, resistance. The Constitution didn't evolve because it wanted to or because people knew it was the right thing to do. It evolved because people were forced to do it. And it's clear to see, when we look back at the original document, it still protected slavery without naming it, property over people, and elite power over mass participation. Voting is left to states that openly restrict it. The system is built on the core assumption that people cannot be trusted with too much power. And so, again, when we take a step back, the Constitution isn't asking what is just or what should we be doing for the people. It was instead more designed to not fall apart. And its original design was not to give the rights that we know it for today. These rights that Americans cherish most exist because the original system was pressured to change. And that tension between stability and justice has defined every American conflict since, and it still does.